Only 3 days left of notes. Guys, are you excited? Because I am. I'm tired of this. Anyways, today we're going to be going over some basics of statistics. So, a couple definitions of words that you'll hear pretty often. So, whenever you have some kind of survey or a study or something like that, there are two groups, if you will. So basically, you have your population. The population is the entire group of people or objects that you want information about. Now, when you do a study, you can't always ask everybody in the group. So, like, let's say that I want to know information about students at Newsom High School. Can I ask every single student? I could, but it's not going to be very easy because there's over 3,000 kids at Newsom. So the 3,000 kids in that situation would be the population. But since you can't ask everybody, because that would take a really long time, you would take what's called a sample. A sample is part of the population. And so you're taking just a part of it, a group, a sample of that population, and that's the one that you're giving the survey or the experiment to. So population and sample, those two are related. And then any data or information that you gather from a population or a sample, you can read the definitions below. When a parameter is any kind of data or information or a measure that describes the entire population, versus a statistic, which is just information about the sample, so just that group. So in some like toothpaste commercials, you'll hear 4 out of 5 dentists recommend Colgate. Well, that 4 out of 5 dentists would be a statistic because that's just 4 out of the 5 dentists that they asked. Versus who were they trying to find information about in that study? Well, they're trying to find information about all the dentists. So that would have been a parameter. But since they didn't ask all the dentists, the 4 out of 5 is a statistic. That's just a simplified example. So here's a situation. First example we're going to identify which one is a population and which one is the sample. So it says a school newspaper randomly selects 30 students from each grade level to participate in a survey to determine their opinions about football. So that's a situation, and we just need to figure out which one is the population and which one is the sample. Well, usually the easiest one you can find is the sample. The sample is just the group, the small group that they're actually doing the survey. So in this case, what's the small group that's actually doing the survey? Well, it's going to be the 30 students. 30 students from each grade level. Sorry about my handwriting. It's getting worse and worse as time goes by. All right, so that's the sample. Those are usually really easy to identify in the problem. That'll like say it word for word. The population you usually have to give a little bit of thought to. So if you think about it, they're just trying to find opinions about football. Well, they sampled 30 students from each grade level, and this was a school newspaper. So then that means who are they trying to find information about? Who's the big group that they're choosing the 30 from? Well, they're trying to find information from the entire school. So all the students at the school. So that's the population. They're trying to find information about all the students at the school, but that's not necessarily easy to do. So they just sample 30 students from each grade level and ask them. That way it's easier. So that's an example of identifying population versus a sample. Now let's practice identifying whether information that you get from a survey is a parameter or a statistic. So in this situation, it says a high school has 3 lunch periods. In a randomly selected period, 24% of students brought lunch from home. So you need to ask yourself, does that 24% of students, is that information about the entire school, or is that information only about the sample that they asked? So that's where you kind of have to reread the problem to figure out, does the 24% represent the entire school or just the sample? Well, it says before that, before the 24%, it says in a randomly selected lunch period. So that means that the 24% of students was just from that randomly selected lunch period. That 24% does not represent the entire high school. Or it's chosen to represent, but the 24% is not something that describes as a fact the entire school. That 24% only as a fact represents that one randomly selected lunch period. So since the 24% does not represent the entire population, it represents the sample. So then if it only represents the sample, that means that this is a statistic. Because the 24%, like I said, only represents the sample, not the entire population. All right, so here's your homework. First question, you're identifying what is a sample and what is a population. And then the second question, you are identifying whether the information that's given is a parameter or a statistic.